Hello fellow crafters, Janine here, and today I'm going to be taking you through how to knit this market bag. It is made with a cotton yarn. I think this one was peaches and cream, and I think each skein, oh here we go, I've got it's a peaches and cream cotton yarn, and each one of these balls was about 70 grams or 2.5 ounces, and I used 3 balls. My idea behind the design of this bag was there was a couple of purposes I had with with designing this bag this way. First was the fact that a lot of the market bags I'd seen called for knitting a bottom and then having to pick up stitches all around to knit the body, and I really didn't like having to do all that picking up stitches. It's not my favorite thing to do. Or a lot of them you just cast on a whole like 120 stitches on circular needles, and then knit, and then you have a big hole you have to close up at the bottom, or you gradually decrease and still have a hole to close at the bottom. So I just knitted my son a hat in this method, you know, where you start with like 4 stitches in the center and knit your way out in magic loop to create the top of the hat. And I thought, well, you know, there's no reason you couldn't use that for the bottom of a market bag. So there would be no seaming to do around the bottom, no stitches to pick up, and no hole to close. And then the other idea I had, because I am somebody that really is just not crazy about having a lot of leftover yarn, because I hate throwing anything away, and I don't like waste, but I don't necessarily like having a lot of leftover yarn. I don't do a lot of mishmash projects where you just use them all for one project. That's not my thing either. So I thought, well, whatever I do with it, I want to make sure I use up the yarn that I'm using. And I came very close, and you'll see that at the end of the video. And the other thing is so many of these hobo bags, slouchy bags, market bags, whatever you want to call them, just have one very long shoulder strap that's knitted onto it. And for a market bag, I did not find that very practical. If you're going to be putting a few grocery items in here, and you know it's going to be carrying some weight, that could be uncomfortable on a shoulder strap, and then the shoulder straps are too long to really just carry, you know, by hand. So I decided that I wanted a bag that had 2 handles, 2 short handles, you know, similar to a grocery style bag, that had, you know, good strength to them to carry maybe a few heavy little items, maybe some, you know, a couple of cans of vegetables or fruit and a gallon of milk, or, you know, or half gallon of milk. I don't think it'd be big enough for a gallon of milk, but anyway, that it could handle the weight but not have to be on the shoulder. So those were the things that inspired me into the design of this bag. So if you'd like to see the techniques that I used in knitting this bag, follow along with this video. Also go to my blog, janinescraftroom.blogspot.com, and the written instructions will be there. For this project, you're going to need 3 balls of cotton yarn, and I'm using peaches and cream, and these are 2.5 ounces or 70.9 grams each, or 120 yards each. And you need 3, and they can be in any colors you can choose. You can use, like I'm using 2 balls in one color and 1 ball in a second color. You can do 3 different colors, or you can do them all the same color, whatever suits your tastes. I'm also going to be working with 7 size interchangeable needles, and I'm starting with a 40-inch cable because I'm going to start in magic loop style, but then once I've got all of my stitches cast on, I'm going to change to a 24-inch cable because it's easier to get started doing magic loop style, but then it's easier to complete and work on the bag on a circular needles. And I'm also going to be using stitch markers because they're just going to make it easier so that we don't have to count for every increased row. It's just going to make your life so much easier to have the stitch markers. So let's go ahead and cast on and get started. Okay, to get started, I'm going to use Judy's Magic Cast On, and I'm only casting on 4 stitches to start. So you hold your needles like this, and with the tail closest to you, you slip it on the bottom needle like so, and then you give it a twist, which will put the tail furthest away from you, like that. And then in the slingshot method, holding your needles like this, go under and through to cast a stitch onto the top needle. Then to cast another stitch on the bottom, go over and through, and then under and through, and that's it. We've cast on all the stitches that we're going to be starting with. So I'm going to turn the needles over like this, and again I'm going to give these 2 pieces a little twist, and I'm going to drop the tail through like so. I'm going to pull the top needle long, and I'm going to knit these 4 stitches. On the bottom needle, we're going to knit regular, this is the hardest part. It is so fidgety getting started, but once you get them going, it gets much easier. And you drop that needle while holding this needle and the stitches securely. Pull that one through, turn the needles, give everything a tug and tighten it up. And that pesky little tail didn't stay where I wanted it. Okay, now on the next needle you're going to knit through the back loop, because right now the stitches are what would be considered twisted. So I'm going to knit through the back loop, which is going to turn the stitch in the right direction. And I'm sorry, my needle keeps splitting the yarn. That's 1, and that's 2. So now we've got those 4 stitches secured. And now we're going to start increasing. And I know it seems crazy to start with so little stitches for such a big project, but this way there will be no hole in the bottom of the bag that needs to be closed. It's already closed up. So we're going to knit through the front and back loop of each stitch, and then we're going to knit around. So we knit through the front of the stitch. Let me see if I can zoom in and make that a little easier for you to see. Okay, we're going to knit through the front of the stitch, but we're not going to drop that stitch off of the needle. We're going to twist around and go through the back loop and knit again. And now we've got 2 stitches on the needle instead of 1, and now we drop the stitch that we were knitting through off the needle. Again, you're going to knit regularly through the front loop, and then through the back loop, and now we have 4 stitches on the needle, and we drop the one we just knitted through. I'm going to repeat the process on the next needle and the next 2 stitches. again, you knit through the front of the stitch in a normal fashion. Then knit through the back of the stitch, through the back loop. That's what TBL means, until you have 2 stitches on your needle, and then drop the working stitch. Okay, now we have 8 stitches on our needles. We've doubled the amount of stitches we have. And before you increase again, you increase on every other round. And then you knit in between those increase rounds. So now we're just going to knit all 8 of these stitches. Now that I've knitted all 8 of these stitches, we're going to go through the same process and knit through the front and back loop of all 8 stitches, and then knit around. This is also where we're going to start placing our markers. So once I knit through the front and back loop of the first stitch, and then the second stitch, now we place a marker. Okay, we're going to knit through the front and back loop of the next 2 stitches. Got to knit through the back loop. Oh, this is being ornery today. Okay, now you should have 8 stitches on your first needle. We're going to go to the second needle. So this is why you couldn't start with your 24-inch circular needles to begin with, because we don't have nearly enough fabric to go around the needles yet. So we're going to go through the same process, knit in the front and back loop. Of the first 2 stitches. And place another marker. Knit through the front and back loop of the last 2 stitches. Okay, I'm going to make one left after the first stitch on the needle, and you use the little bar that's in between the first and second stitch. You pull it up, insert your needle through the front of it. Now this is the way I do it because it makes it a little easier. I take the needle and I roll it from front to back, and now I'll knit through the back loop of that little bar, and then I knit up until the stitch that's right before the marker. So here's our marker right here, and here's the stitch that's right before it. So now we're going to make one right, and to do that, pull up that little bore in between the stitches, place the left hand needle through the back of it, and now I'm going to use this, my right hand needle, to kind of pull that up a little bit, hold it with the middle finger of my left hand, and then run the needle through the front of that little opening. And it can be tricky. It's how you know you're doing your make ones correctly if they're a little bit difficult. And then knit through that, and now we've increased by a stitch. Go ahead and knit the stitch that's right before the marker, slip the marker from the left to the right needle, and now we know it's time to increase again. So we're going to knit the next stitch after the marker. So what we're going to be doing is increasing before the stitch that's right before the marker, and we're going to increase after the stitch that's right after the marker. So you're going to be increasing on either side of the stitches that are on either side of the marker. So we're going to make one left. So we're going to insert the needle, pull up that little bar, insert the needle in the front of it, roll your needle around through it to the back, and then knit through the back loop. Knit the next two stitches, knit all the way to the last stitch, and then right before the last stitch we're going to make one right. So we're going to put the needle in to the back of that bar, pull it open a little bit, knit through that stitch, and now you should have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 stitches on each needle, and you're going to knit around. So you increase around, then knit around, increase around, and knit around, and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to increase the same way for each increase round. You're going to knit right after the first stitch on the needle. You're going to increase right after the first stitch on the needle. You're going to increase right before the stitch that's right before the marker. Then you're going to increase at the stitch that's right after the marker, and then you're going to increase right before the last stitch. So this way you don't have to count each time. Like if we were going to do the counting, which I did show that in the pattern. So you would knit, increase, then knit 3 stitches, then increase, knit 2 stitches, increase, knit 4 stitches, increase, so forth. It gets really complicated. Using your markers as your visual about where you need to increase makes your life so much easier. So I'm going to go ahead and knit around, and then increase, knit, and increase, and I'm going to do that until I reach the number of stitches on my needles that are shown in the pattern.